Alan, what is K-band?
Well, I'm going to give you a little bit of history about the K-band. It was actually called the X-band in the beginning because I didn't know what to call it. And I didn't know about Keltner bands either at that time. I just knew the problem I wanted to solve, and that was, is something trending strongly in this moment? And I wanted a rather instantaneous thing. So as you can see on your chart, there's no lines. There's that tinted color that goes around the candle. So it highlights the candle quite easily for you to see. But in the beginning, the X-band, as it was called, had lines on the chart that would get narrow when things were trending in a channel, which is the opposite of what a Bollinger would do, which would get wider. And one of the discoveries on the path was seeing the effect of the X-band being inside the Bollinger lines. Now, we made a different Bollinger called the G-band, which is faster, more refined, and more responsive than the Bollinger. So what we did then is we said, okay, how is the X-band lines when it goes inside of the G-band lines? And was that a good trade? And it did help. It was, so that was an improvement. But it didn't answer all the questions, but it did confirm that something was trending when the bands were narrow. So here you're seeing the tinting, which is evolved still from that, but basically you're seeing that this is trending, and that's why you get that version of paint, which is much easier than, well, is this thing inside of that line, and blah, blah, blah. So after hearing about the Keltner lines from a veteran trader, we compared the two indicators, and we found that the X-band was more effective and responsive than Keltner, and it behaved better than Keltner almost always. And at that point, it was renamed to be the K-band. But the improvements didn't stop there. So changing the tinted background was part of it. And then the interpretation of that, I'll leave you to discuss, Stephen, because now you're talking about putting things together. But at this simple singular thing of an indicator, the tinted background worked well visually. So the point about the K-band formula is that it's not just a math formula like Bollinger or Keltner. It includes logic of this and this, if this, then that, and other tests and comparisons. So it's very sophisticated math and logic. And that moves it into a category of an indicator beyond a simple moving average or MACD or Keltner. It truly is an advancement where it has logic and math.
As you can see, there are now two indicators painted on this multi-year chart. So you have the trigger, which we discussed in another video, and now you have the K-band portrayed by this blue highlight and yellow highlight. Now, blue means it's trending upwards with K-band signal, and yellow is the inverse of that, so going down with K-band. And one of the biggest issues in trading and investing is timing. And timing has a lot to do with each individual's idea for that specific trade or investment. But one specific thing that doesn't change across the board is conditions of the stock at that time. And sometimes people's system includes that assessment, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's more of an individual assessment. Well, the K-band allows us to see and distinguish what is the current situation of the stock. Is it trending up strongly or trending down strongly? Now, as you can see, sometimes a signal will go on for one candle, and then it's off, and then it's back on for several candles. Now, again, keep in mind, this is over the course of years. So having this indicator at each scale is very important depending on what your strategy is. You want to know when things are happening and when they're not. That's going to be a large part of your risk assessment, and it's going to keep you really, really sustainable over time depending on what strategy you're using. So again, keeping things actionable and simple is critical when you're creating your own system. This is what we've strived to do, and Alan's done it again and again and again. These are very simple indicators. Here's a question for you. Is K-band on the current candle? The current candle is the rightmost candle. Yes, it is. That's what keeps it actionable, and that's what's going to keep us into low risk trading and investing.
And I believe, Stephen, that you have other videos that describe putting the pieces together, in as much as when you have the background trigger color mixed with the K-band color, what do you do then? And if you have one but not the other, what do you do then? And that's a putting it together where it's a trading system. And I know we're only talking about indicators, but you can even see on this one chart how much of an improvement somebody can have in their success as a trader just by saying, hey, if I always have to have those two things turned on to call it a good trade, doesn't that improve my odds? And it's like, oh yeah.
Absolutely. And the value of the system is more than the sum of its parts. This is one of those favorite trending definitions in systems, and I just generalized it. So what we're talking about is breaking down different indicators like trigger and K-band, and now we're talking about how they interact with each other. This is very exciting. So let's do a quick example. You have trigger on here, and you have K-band on here. Now, what did you see happen after that? Now, this is not a guarantee, but what we're looking at is just behaviors. Now, let's go and use the same logic when the trigger is not on. So what do you see? The K-band is on here, and the trigger for downward, the red trigger, is not on. What happened afterwards? See, this is very, very easy to distinguish if those two signals are on, what kind of risk you're dealing with. Okay, so here's another example. The K-band is on, but the trigger is not. And then the following behavior is inconsistent. This is very, very important. You have to practice and learn the behaviors of how these different indicators respond and interact with each other. And that takes practice, and we have coaches and coaching courses for that. But here, it's very, very simple with these two indicators.